Okay. I'm going to go into my rant about the Final Fantasy Dissidia Final Fantasy NT. It's always weird how they put Final Fantasy after Dissidia. Okay, if you guys don't know, because I wrote this down, and I'm going to get to this, goddammit, before I finish this podcast. Okay. So, Dissidia Final Fantasy was, at first, a series of 2 fighting games that came out on the PSP in, like, the 2000s, I think. And they are essentially the Final Fantasy fighting games. They are 3D arena fighters with Final Fantasy characters, and they're fucking great. They are really good. I think so, at least. I love them. I mainly played Duodecim. I never really played the original. Okay. You want to talk about sequels that completely invalidate the originals? Okay, so Dissidia 1 comes out, and it's pretty well received. Sequel, Duodecim, comes out, Dissidia Duodecim, and it's basically the first game, except it's just better. As in, like, you know, system and balance changes, more characters, more content, stuff like that. And when I say it's literally the first game, I mean it very literally. I'm saying literally, because it actually just has the first game's entire story mode, and then a bonus story mode for Duodecim, which essentially there's a new story mode for some of the new characters they added in Duodecim. That's like a prequel to it. So there is no reason to play the original Dissidia. You just play Duodecim because the systems are a lot better. There's like a lot of little minor improvements. There's new systems, there's new modes, there's more characters, there's more moves, there's a bunch more items and stuff like that, and it has the original story plus a new one. So just play it. Just play that one instead. Okay. I just want to gush about Duodecim first. Duodecim is really, really fun. Essentially, the entire Dissidia series was actually inspired by Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, which, if you've ever seen that movie, is mainly just valuable for the epic fight scenes, the super badass anime CG cutscene fight scenes in that movie. Of like Cloud versus Sephiroth. I think it was literally like someone at Square, some like director or producer, saw Advent Children and he saw the fight scene with Cloud versus Sephiroth. If you haven't seen the movie, but you have seen Sephiroth's trailer for Smash Ultimate, that scene of him and Cloud fighting near the end is almost directly like shot for shot, like it's a partial recreation of their fight scene. It's really sick. He saw that scene and he was like, we should make a game that's like this. So Dissidia is kind of like anime combat simulator. I think it honestly does a better job at emulating a super cool anime fight scene than most actual anime arena fighters do. So when I say that, I mean, okay, so it's a 3D arena fighter, right? But there's a bunch of different stages, and every single one has super different layouts and like geography and unique elements to it. So there'll be like unique mechanics, like what is it? One of the smallest stages I remember is Pandemonium. It's based off Final Fantasy II, like the final dungeon, and I think it's like it's split up into like these two. It's a very small, like enclosed arena, and it's split into these kind of two halves. And one of the halves gets like, they alternate, they have like a little bridge between them, but they alternate between which one has like spikes on it or something like it. So there'll be a little like flashing warning that it's going to transition. And then you have to like go between, both players have to like go between the two halves of the stage. So you get fun stuff like that. Every single wall in the game you can run on. It's literally, like you go up to, once you're near a wall, you get a little like arrow indicator, and if you press triangle, your character will just like magnet feet start running up the wall, and you can just like run around. There's no limit to it. You can just run up the wall on any surface. Like, you can run up pillars, cliffs, anything. You can run on the sides of platforms, and then you can, like, jump off. There's, like, air dodges. There's directional air dodges. There's 360-degree air dashing, which you can... The game has this whole system... Oh, fuck, I'll get to that in a second. There's rails that you can, like, grind like a Sonic game, which is the same interaction of, like, you just press triangle when you're near one, and you'll start grinding up it, and, like, while you're on the rail, you can jump off, and then you get, like, an air dodge in the air, and you can do all this fucking sick... You can, like, air dash towards your opponent. There's, like, the ground movement is cool. Like, there's still, like, similar kind of, like, systems of, like, rolls and dashing. It's fucking so sick. And it has all this customization where you essentially have a load... Every character, like, levels up. There's this whole progression system, an RPG progression system like we were talking about earlier. Every character levels up the more you play with them. And leveling them up... Well, you get a couple things. Number one is you get access to new moves. So every character has 3 moves on the ground and 3 moves in the air. Sorry, no, wait. Technically 6 moves on the ground, 6 moves in the air. Because you have what are basically light and heavy attacks. I'll get into that later too. And as you level up, you get this thing. I hate that they called it CP. It's like character points, but I hate it when games call it CP because it's like, but it's called CP. And essentially, you have a bunch of different, like, optional bonuses that you can add to your character, like a 360-degree air dash, or an infinite air dash, or an extra air action. Oh, and there's, like, double jumps and stuff like that. And then a bunch of, like, systems, like, you can customize it, like, how your character interacts with the system. There's also, there's, like, summon crystals. So, like, all this way that they integrated the summons from the Final Fantasy series is that you can basically, like, equip a summon to yourself, and each one has a different effect that will trigger. It has, like, a certain trigger that'll happen during the battle. Like, if your health falls below a certain percent, your summon will trigger and it will have a certain effect. Like, it maxes your bravery. I'll talk about the fucking bravery HP system now. So essentially, the game's light attacks are called... It has this really interesting health system where you have this number, which is called bravery. And you have, like, a base level of bravery, and it goes up when you hit your opponent with bravery attacks. You basically, like, leech bravery from them. So, like, they lose it when they... If you a bravery attacks raise your bravery, and they lower your opponent's. And when it hits 0, you get a brave break, which means that not only do you hit 0, and then... So basically it's like... the person who breaks the opponent gets a big... It's called, like, the stage bravery bonus. So they get a big bonus to their bravery. And then the opponent, it has to, like... Their bravery can't suffer any more damage until it gets back up to the base level. And then the way you use your bravery is with HP attacks, which are kind of like the heavies. So HP attacks spend your bravery to deal damage to your opponent's actual health points. So the game is basically about, like, building up your bravery using these kind of lighter bravery attacks, doing, dodging and dashing in and out of specific ranges, and then building it up and then catching them off guard or whiff punishing something and hitting them with an HP attack. The game is very, very neutral heavy. What I mean by that is there's basically no combos. Like, moves will hit multiple times, and sometimes there's ways that you can set up where you can get string multiple moves together, but it's not super common. And it's kind of a character specific, or there's a lot of mechanics. There's, like, assists in the game that you can call in. Once you have, like, you fill up an assist bar, you can call an assist in, and you can get combos off of, like, assist attacks essentially. So, like, it's very, like, character and, like, assist focused, whether or not you can actually string multiple moves together. The game is basically balanced. It's designed around a lot of, like, individual attacks. and it's very weighty feeling. So moves have a lot of recovery time after you throw them out. Like if you whiff an attack, it's like, fuck, you're hanging there for a second. Less so with bravery attacks, but you can still have that. Yeah, you side note, you can like also like unlock new moves, and you can actually like switch out. You get 3 slots for the air and 3 slots for the ground, and you can switch out which moves your character is using. And you can assign them to like different inputs and stuff. It's really nice. So the game is like actually super tense because it revolves. Am I going to compare it to Samurai Showdown? I think I just might, because it's not too far off, if I'm being honest. It's super whiff punish heavy, and it's really focused around like playing footsies with your opponent, and like throwing something out and like trying to bait them into a certain range, and then like trying to like as quickly as you can like dash, like you can kind of like dodge cancel at a certain point in the move's recovery, and like get out of the like dodge out of the way and then punish them when they try to punish you, and it's really cool. Some people say that like the combat feels kind of floaty. It sort of does, but once you get used to it, it's so cool, because again, you're doing all of this not just in like a grounded sense, but you're doing this like in the air and like running off of walls and jumping off of them and grinding on rails. And the stages are really cool because there's a ton of variety to them. There's stages that have a ton of verticality. There's ones that are big and open. There's ones that are more flat. They have like unique little stage hazards sometimes. There's like bottomless pits and things like that. There's fucking destructible parts of the environment all around. You can play one of the stages. One of the most cramped stages is the Phantom Train from Final Fantasy VI. You get to play in the Phantom Train in one of the cars, and like all the seats are destructible, and you can just blow through, smash someone and blow them through all the seats. It's really cool. It is like anime combat simulator. The game's badass. It's really fun. And ultimately, I think the reason it wasn't more popular is that it was just on the PSP, which didn't even... PSP was, I think, sold pretty well. But, like, the fact that it didn't get any other releases beyond that is a real shame, because it's great. And it has, like, a lot of content. Duodecim has a ton of content. It's not just the story modes, but, like, there's all of these optional lore entries that you can unlock. The story mode is actually, like, a fairly fleshed out, like, you can run around in a little environment and go, essentially, encounter these sort of NPCs who are, like, copies of Final Fantasy villains. They're, like, clones. You're essentially fighting clones the whole game, but, like... Yeah, no, it's good. Every single character has a little arc. There's tons of references. Obviously, it uses like all the music. There's a really cool dungeon mode where you like you start out with like one character, and then you go through like these rooms of a dungeon just on like a map. And every room, there's like a bunch of different layouts to the dungeons. Like they can have different... You can find items which you can equip to your character, because there's this whole item equipping thing, which might honestly be a little too much, but like, the game has a ton of content, and it's really fun. So a couple years go by, and a new Dissidia game gets announced, Dissidia NT. And it's not going to be like the previous games. So for number one, it's not getting a handheld release because the PSP wasn't around, and Vita was pretty much on its way out around, excuse me, like 2016, 2017 when it came out. So it's going to start off with an arcade release. Okay, that's different. In Japan. And then it's going to get a console release. Okay, so if you're fucking cool, you're gonna get fucking a console, like modern, like PS4 graphics, modern graphics with the Dissidia characters. Because one of the coolest things about the game, as like a Final Fantasy fan, is that all of the character designs are based off of like the original concept artwork, namely from like Yoshitaka Amano. So like the Final Fantasy 1 representative is the Warrior of Light, who's that, like, if you look at the Japanese cover of FF1, that's the character. Like, that's who he is, and they couldn't depict that because it's too complex of a design in, like, 8 bits, but, like, all of those designs you get to see in 3D in Dissidia, and it's like, oh, man, fuck, just, like, a full game in the Amino style would be so good. So cool. But just at least getting to see them in 3D and, like, fighting is it's a fine compromise. When I say it's not like the other games, it wasn't just that it was going to get a console release and that it was going to be, all new and shiny. Because Square, if we're going to talk about how Square puts all these shitty live service games out, Square was like, I'm assuming this is how it went. Square, some executives said, hey, esports are big. What do we got? And because Square, like, doesn't make any, like, competitive games, really, they were like, we do have this one. We made, like, a fighting game, like, 7 years ago. Yeah. That's going to be our new esport. Well, what's so wrong with that? You might ask. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's a competitive game. Whatever. It wasn't just going to be an esport. It was going to be, like, the ones that they saw were successful. As in, it was going to be a team game. Not team as in, like, a Marvel vs. Capcom kind of way, or even a KOF kind of way. It was going to be 3 players versus 3 players. Yeah. So, there's this interesting thing that happens when you change the, what would you even call that? The format of a game so drastically, which is that you have to design the game completely differently. Here's an example. When Arxis was developing Strive, they settled on the fact that they wanted wall breaks in the game. They probably made that decision very early on. And they said, okay, if we're going to commit to this idea of wall breaks, there's characters that we want in the game who just straight up do not make any sense. So, like, Ramlethal, completely different. Sort of. Her moveset's completely redesigned from Exert to Strive, because in Exert, her whole thing was, she has this kind of finicky, rascally, weaselly kind of neutral, and then she gets a hit, and then she converts that into a full juggle into the corner, and then she sets up the swords, and then she mixes your ass to hell and back, and she just stomps you in the corner. That literally doesn't work in Strive. If they ported over that exact kind of moveset, Ramlethal would be fucking awful. She'd be terrible. Because she would have weird, finicky, rascally, not great neutral, and then she would get a hit, and then carry you to the corner. Oh, okay, cool. And then she would do what she wants, which is to open you up in the corner, and then she would just break the wall, and she'd be back to square one. Getting her win condition would literally punish her. So they had to totally remake her. So they kind of, like, she has a similar kind of win condition, but she does it in a totally different way. Where instead now, she is really, arguably way too good neutral. One of the most just fucking, like, I hit the button. Far slash. And then she gets you to the corner, and then she still has an interaction with the wall where, like, okay, she can throw her swords, the swords land in the wall, and then they explode after a delay. So she still has the idea of, like, she's setting up the swords, and then if you're in the corner, you can't just ignore the swords, because, in Exert, it's like, there's a delay, and then the swords come down, but in Strive, it's like, they explode. So same sort of kind of pressure, and then she hits you with just a big old damage combo. So, like, that big old damage combo that she gets when she hits you in the wall is like the replacement for the repeated looping combos that she would get, or that she would, like, be resetting you with in Exert. That was how they dealt with that design problem. Let's look at NT compared to Duodecim. Namely, my favorite character from Duodecim, Golbez, the Final Fantasy IV villain representative. So the roster is entirely like a hero, and the main hero and the main villain from like every Final Fantasy game. So that's the core roster, and then Duodecim added a lot of like other characters like Tifa, Laguna, Lightning. But beside that, Yuna. Yuna was in Duodecim. So basically, Golbez, his playstyle is so cool. Essentially, Golbez, the concept behind every single one of Golbez's attacks is that they have a close range and a long range element to them. So you aren't choosing between close or long range. It'll be something like he has a move where he makes like a pillar of like magical light energy shoot up, like a big geyser of energy shoot up at a far distance away from him. And then while he does that move, he does this kind of like swipe while he's casting it. It's that kind of, and that's your close range element. A lot of them kind of work like that. It'll be something like he swipes up close and causes some kind of magic to happen further away. So his strong, and if he lands certain moves, specifically like his longer range moves, he can tend to directly, he could go into one of the most busted things in the game, Bravery to HP attacks, which he has this, it's called like Galactic Storm or something like that, which is just like if you hit, a Bravery to HP attack is the most literal thing, it's exactly what it sounds like. If you land the Bravery attack, you can hit the square button, which is the HP attack button, and it'll just instantly, like automatically combo transition into an HP attack. So he can do that off of like 4 of his moves that are really good. So you just kind of like, that's your kind of goal, is you're just going to like hit them a bunch of times from long range. And then at close range, you can actually tend to usually kind of push them outwards again with your little swipey swipe. So yeah, that's the premise behind a lot of Golbez's moves. He has a close range and a long range variant where he's strong. But he has a noticeable gap, which is everything in between. Because there's a decent distance between like directly in front of him and like, 40 feet away, where the long range part will happen. So basically, it's not like that far. It's not like 40 feet away. It's not that long range, but it'll be like a decent ways in front of him. So essentially, Golbez, the way you play Golbez is that he has this game. He has this kind of dance where he's trying to keep the opponent in one of his strong ranges, long or close. And the opponent is trying to get into the middle range. And there's this whole, like, it's like a dance, because the opponent is trying to, they'll step into, like, a round where he can hit them with a, like the long range part of the move, and then they'll go back in to try and bait him out into throwing it, and then they're going to punish the recovery. And it's really fun. It's a really fun play style. Like managing all these different spacings and stuff like that. Now in a 3v3 setting, that doesn't work. Because this whole back and forth dance between both players completely falls apart if some fucking guy can just zoom in from off screen and just start slapping into you. It adds such a level of chaos that it becomes like really interesting things from the gameplay are not possible. It veers into like party game tier kind of thing. So Golbez's old moveset and his old design don't work. So what did they do? Well, he had to be completely remade from the ground up. And they made so now instead of like this cool like close range, long range kind of play, which is not a thing you see in a lot of games in general. Now he has a move where he throws a wind magic orb, and he has this other move where he throws a water magic orb, and he has this other move where he throws a rock, like a earth magic orb, and he hits you with the orbs, and they don't really combo in any interesting way. He has projectiles and he throws them, and then don't leave, because we're not done. He has something else. Okay, he's got something else. Okay, every character in NT got like a unique skill. Oh, what's Golbez's skill? Like they called them like EX skills or something. What's Golbez's? He gets a little dragon that he can summon. And it doesn't like do anything. It's like a visual like power up that he can do. And then when he has the dragon power up on, he gets his moves do a little more damage. And he can summon like 2 meteors instead of 1 meteor for his HP attack. Woo, that's really something there. That's okay then. All right. So basically there's this, if you look at characters like how they reworked them from Duodecim to NT, a lot of them remained relatively similar, but there was a lot of casualties as well. And when you look at the casualties in general, they basically traded out this incredible, like this interesting, very like deep moveset with like, there's maybe not a ton of things in it, but the way that it's applied gives a lot of, makes a lot of interest. It's doing more with a little, right? It's these, you only have so many of these like things going on in a character, but the way that they use creates interesting, a variety of interesting situations. And they took that depth and they basically replaced it, because it wasn't possible to keep it, they replaced it with complexity. They just replaced it with a new mechanic. There's one like decent example of this. And it's honestly one of the few characters I think was notably improved in the transition to NT, which is Bart's. So Bart's okay, so there's this problem because in Duodecim, one of the cool things is that every character's moveset tends to reflect something about their game. So like some kind of unique mechanic or something. So like Lightning has the paradigm shift where she has basically 3 different stances that she can go into, just like the combat system in Final Fantasy 13. What the heck? There's a character, what is her name? Prisha? Something like that? Who is like a monk from Final Fantasy XI, and her moves all combo together like Final Fantasy XI character, like monk characters. Not everyone has like a super different mechanic, so I'm just trying to think. Cecil has like, is also a stance character. He can switch between Paladin and Dark Knight mode. So that's cool. Bart's and Vaughn, or however, I can see where the team struggled, because both of their games have a heavy emphasis on the job system. So if you were going to make a fighting game moveset for one of them, you're like, oh, obviously, you would use the job system. So like every different type of attack that they have is them switching to a different job. That's cool. But both games have that, so like there'd be overlap. So Vaughn gets the job system based moveset where like, oh, he actually changes. He has like, in the air he can pull out like, I forget what the jobs are called in 12, and he'll pull out like a gun, or like he can pull out a bow for the archery thing, and or like on the ground he gets these different he can cast magic, and then he can do all these different types of jobs. Bart's, they were like, oh well, what was in 5? What did it have unique? The mimic job. So Bart's in Duodecim is a copycat character. Not for like the opponent he's fighting. It's just his moves literally just reuse other characters' attacks. Like, he pulls out the Cloud's Buster Sword, and then he can pull out, and he does an attack with that. Or he pulls out Squall's Gunblade. He does a thing with that. He uses, like, a spell that Terra uses. And it's like, okay, not super interesting. In NT, they basically took his moves. They totally changed both characters. So Bart's is now the job switch character. Vaughn was changed to being like mainly focused around like HP attacks. But Bart's was basically switched to have a really actually cool system for being as complex as it was, where every single attack he had was based off of a job from Final Fantasy V. But there was this level up system where there was like a hidden point value, not terribly dissimilar to like Susanoo from BlazBlue. I don't know if that's a super great analogy, but essentially all of his moves have like different, they start at like the basic level, and then you can level them up to the advanced version of the job. There's only like 2 tiers for each one. And you do that by basically using the move, and then you get like more points towards the level up. It's like if you get like 15 points, then you level up, and you get like 2 for using the move and like 4 for landing, like hitting with the move or something like that. And then you would level it up and it would get way stronger. And he was actually really fun. He was a very fun character to play. He was one of the few exceptions. Like when I was so disappointed with NT. And part of that was like, oh my god, they fucking totally made Golbez so boring. Bart's was actually the character that I started playing because I thought he was way more fun, just straight up. There's a lot of like, okay. Basically, my big problem with NT is that a lot of the interesting, cool neutral was ripped out. In terms of the characters, it was like their tool sets got changed around to be much less interesting and just adding more mechanics. They have everyone has some kind of power-up skill or something like that just is not very interesting when everyone gets something like that. Fucking Ace, who's in there from Final Fantasy Type 0, he's like, he throws cards. Oh, that's cool. But he has this incredibly complicated system of like which cards he throws that like give him different bonuses. And it's like, it was a lot. And so in terms of characters, like their gameplay just kind of got made more complex, but not as interesting or deep. The rest of the game was like, all of the stages had to be made way larger to accommodate 6 players. Like, fuck. All the stages are way larger, and there's no way to get, like, infinite air dash. All the customization has been ripped out. Everyone has, like, you can't even switch out, like, what moves have certain, like, bindings. Or like certain, which inputs certain moves around, which you could in the previous games. There's no, like, customizing them with, like, specific perks. There's no equipping like gear, like equipment, which I'm actually kind of fine with because there's just like, it was a little much. There's like something like several hundred pieces of gear in Duodecim, and it's just a lot. But like all that stuff is gone. There was no dungeon mode. A lot of the cool parts of the game were just not there. And so like the actual experience of playing the game was like, oh, there's a fucking guy way over there. Time to air dash. Oh, my air dash is running out. I ran out. Okay, now I just gotta run. Oh, it's back up again. Gonna air dash. And, like, you're just... It's so... That was what I was feeling so much of the time playing it. And they're just... Sometimes it could be fun. Because Dissidia is fun. And there's parts of it left in the game. But the deeper parts that was, like, really made me want to put, like, several hundred hours into Duodecim just were not there for NT. It was just so simple and, like, boring. And there's people who are just, like, staunch defenders of the game. And they say, the team aspect. Here's the problem. Okay, so here's how winning and losing works in NT. In the previous games, it was just, someone's HP gets to 0. In NT, you have stocks, okay? So you get knocked out. You have 3 stocks. And anyone getting knocked out, you come back, you just have to like revive after a few seconds. But anytime someone gets knocked out, that's a stock gone. And you have 3. So now I've gone on rants before on this podcast about why making games more team dependent or team reliant is a terrible decision for most players, for like the majority of your player base. Yeah, NT is like a textbook example. Because like I'm over here fighting this guy. We're having a little duel. I'm not doing anything wrong. And then I lose the game. We lose the game instantly because, the 2 guys like on the other side of the map got like fucking bum rushed and then just died. And then one of them respawned and died again. Fucking I didn't contribute at all to the loss. And it's, it's so bad. Oh, it's so bad. That was infuriating. Which leads me to the online. Because there was no, okay. Oh no, do I gotta talk about the single player content? So the single player content was just a story mode. You're like, okay, story mode. Yeah. The story mode is dumb. It's really dumb. I'm not talking about the story itself. I'm sure it is dumb, because it's Dissidia. Dissidia is kind of dumb. I mean, parts of the story were cool, but... The way that NT's story works is that you can't just play the story. It's essentially divided. You go to the story mode, and it's divided into nodes on like a not quite a grid, but like there's a starting point, and then there's a couple branches off from that, and it's all moving in one direction, and there's a couple like branching paths, but then it all ends up kind of going back to the end of the game. At the end of the story. You're like, okay, what's wrong with that? The nodes have to be unlocked. So I even remember what it was called. There was a currency, basically, that you would get by playing matches, I think online, or versus the CPU. It was called Memoria. And then you could spend so many Memoria to unlock a node on the story mode map. And then you could play it. And some of them were just cutscenes. Some of them were battles. Some of them were cutscenes. Why the fuck would you do it? It's just padding. It's pure padding to just not let you play. I would have to go in because I never finished it. I got like... My experience with it was that I got like a couple nodes in, and then I was like, oh, I'm out of Memoria. You know what? Instead of like going back and forth, because that's such a choppy experience, let me just grind up. I just counted up like how much Memoria I needed for the whole thing. Let me just grind that out. Let me just grind it out. And then and then I'll go back and I'll play the whole story mode in one shot. And that fucking... And then I tried to play the game online, and I fucking stopped playing it because, like, 2 weeks into the game being out, I was already having like 5-minute wait times for matches, and then I would get a match, and both of my teammates would be bots because they couldn't find another person to play the game. They couldn't find enough people online. I'm talking like in the afternoon on a Friday. Nope. No one playing. And when you were in the game, it's delay-based netcode with 6 people. Delay-based netcode can start falling apart with a 1v1 with just 2 players. 6 people? It was so bad. It was so bad. It was fucking like laggy, froze all the time, disconnections, input delay. Holy crap. Just a disaster. And guess what? The game sold like shit outside of Japan. It might have sold fine in Japan or done fine in arcades, but yeah, guess what? Didn't do that great. And you know what? They deserved it. And it sucks because like, it had like Noctis in it. It had a lot of cool characters. It had a fucking Ramza from Final Fantasy Tactics. That Square does not give that game nearly enough love. You know, it had some really cool picks from it. And like, the biggest problem with this game was the focus, in my opinion, the shift to the 3v3 and the arcade, like this esports angle that they tried to pull with it. Because you're like, why did they do this? Because it's like the root of all these problems the game has. It's just like a structural issue with the game. You're like, why did they do this? And there's an interview with like the producer or something, and he goes, the reason we did this, we switched from 1v1 to a 3v3, is because, in his words, and obviously it's because they wanted to have a team esport, but in his words, the reasoning was, Final Fantasy has always been about creating a party of adventurers and going out and doing your thing. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, that was the dungeon mode. That was just the dungeon mode in Duodecim. That's just what that was, is you could collect multiple party members and pick which ones you wanted to and if you want to make the angle of like, but it would be, you could make that even more part of the game by having multiple characters, right, on one side. To which I would say, there's a huge missed opportunity here, and that is to make this a tag team game. I am like envisioning, like, imagine 3D Marvel. Imagine like a 3D arena fighter anime combat simulator, Marvel versus Capcom style game. Or, like a versus type game. And I start where you have like 1 or maybe 2 assists, and you can like tag them in and like do a bunch of combos. And you do it with Final Fantasy characters, and you have all this crazy movement options and customization, and I'm just thinking about it and I'm like, fuck. Or maybe tone it down a little bit with like something like maybe like a Tekken tag, where it's just 2 characters and there aren't like assist call-in attacks or that kind of thing. You could do a thing where there's some game, it's like an anime game or something, where you have like 2 characters that you can tag between, and then like 1 assist character. You could do that, like 1 dedicated assist character, and then another character who can like come in to do like they have a tag in attack or something like that. There's so many cool things you could do, and if you just okay, so like there's like 2 main kind of like, there are improvements. So like Duodecim is not a perfect game by any means. There are a couple things gameplay-wise that could be tweaked. For instance, there are 2 kind of system mechanics that you can sort of build your character to be strong in. One is the assist thing, which is like a gauge that I mentioned. You have to gotta fill up. You can call it an assist. And the other is EX. It's called like EX mode, which is as you're fighting, these little like blue crystals will like spill out, and you'll absorb them into your character, and you'll fill up an EX bar. And occasionally during the match, there'll be points where an EX crystal will spawn, and you can go get it. It'll give you a big bonus. Once you have a maxed out EX gauge, you can go into EX mode, which I don't think it really provides any like stat increases, but it gives you access. It's a limited time mode where you get access to it's a little bit like instant kill from Guilty Gear, to not quite an instant kill, but an EX finisher. So an EX finisher is basically, the EX finisher is when it kills. It's just like an EX attack. Basically, if you hit the opponent with an HP attack while you're in EX mode, you will basically go into... You can hit a button to confirm that you're going to start the EX sequence, and essentially you'll be teleported into like a void super dimension. And every single character has a unique little like mini game that they have to play. So it can be something as simple as like mash the button really fast, or it could be like Tifa has like a slot machine that you have to play, or some kind of like line the thing up and then hit the X button, and then you do a big ol' attack. You do a big ol' super big move. It's like a super move. And everyone has a unique EX sequence, essentially. Sometimes it's like a rhythm game or something like that. It's really cool, and it's like a cool way to, like, every character has a totally different thing, and it's like a big attack and a big sequence of animation, and it only really happens like once a match, maybe? It doesn't happen every match at all, because you have to land the HP attack, first of all, and you're in EX mode, which, like, tells your opponent that's what you're fishing for. But, like, it's really cool. And there's even like a character, Gabranth, I think, from 12, and he's entirely based around EX mode. So I think like his subtitle is called the Executioner, like in the game. Like his title, he's called the Executioner, because he has like 2 bravery attacks. He's got like 1 in the air and 1 on the ground. That's it. He has like no bravery attacks, but his HP attack is not a real attack. It's to charge his EX meter. So he's based around like swatting the opponent away and then just charging up. And then once he's has his full bar, he can go into EX mode. And when he's in EX mode, he gets access to his EX attack. He goes into this whole sequence where he has like a selection of like a dozen different EX moves that you can pick from. And it's like really cool, like this whole character based around this one little system mechanic. EX is a little stronger than assists, except for like a couple characters who can like rely. The main problem is that there's only like a couple good assist characters. You can set any character in the game to be your assist, but only a couple of them are good. Most of them don't really do a whole lot. EX tends to be much more reliable unless you're going for like a specific kind of like combo oriented build. It's like, I remember Kuja was actually really good for that. So you could like totally do a thing where like, okay, new Dissidia, it's gonna have current gen console tier high end graphics. It's gonna look really good. Same 1v1 gameplay, all this customization thing. Maybe tone down how many like items there are, because holy fuck. Rebalance the systems so that they're a little more in line with each other. So that you can still like build towards like, because when I say build, I mean like equipment. Yeah, mainly like equipment, and then certain perks that you can take will like, oh, you build more assist, or you build more EX. Like which kind of what you're kind of focusing on. You still get that customization option, but you are you're gonna like, it's rebalanced, so it's a little better. Maybe it's a little more streamlined, and it's less like You gotta like grind a bunch of character levels or something like that. There's a lot of things. There's so many directions you could have taken those first two games. So many directions you could have taken a third game that would have been really rockin', just really cool. And they wanted the esports money, so they fucking completely fucked it up. And oh my fucking god, I get upset whenever I think about it because I don't know if we're ever gonna see another one. There is like a random like gacha game called Dissidia Opera Omnia. Not at all a fighting game. It's literally like a gacha game RPG. It's neat that it has like a bunch of characters, but yeah, I don't know. It's a gacha game, so it's really not what I'm looking for. I want a fucking sick ass Final Fantasy anime combat simulator with modern graphics and even more shit and cool systems and stuff. That's what I want. Because the core gameplay is already so fun. You just keep it. And now, unfortunately, because Square's a bunch of idiots, I don't know if we'll ever see one again. I hope it's a situation where it's like Ghostbusters and it's like, yeah, we made like a shitty one. We just gotta wait like 5 years to get another crack at it. I hope it's like that. I can only hope.